bullying, embezzlement, and questionable spending.
These are just some of the areas the state auditor may now look at in its examination of the University of Hawaii student housing system. And as KGMB9 Cedric Moon reports, some students say it's about time.
The UH Student Housing Services oversees 10 residence halls used by about 3,000 students, and for the first time, it will be the target of a state audit.
I don't see how it could be a problem, because if anyone's trying to cover up anything, that should be, known about to begin with.
The state auditor is now deciding which allegations it will look into, and there are many.
A lot of students came forward to us with a lot of allegations for a variety of basically, embezzlement, sexual harassment. They're just coming in too big a quantity.
Last year, lawmakers heard testimony from students who claimed some housing staff bullied students critical of the policies and conducted improper searches of dorm rooms. Teresa Martinson is a resident advisor who works at Hale Kahawai. She believes the majority of staffers are fine, but admits there may be a few bad apples.
We do have access, and at any time, at any position, there's always the possibility of abusing your privileges and your responsibilities.
Then there's the condition of the dorm facilities. The Princeton Review ranked UH second in the category of dorms like dungeons.
I don't think some of the bathrooms work. I mean, I've heard of a exploding toilet at the towers.
The school says the audit may be well timed with the expected arrival of a permanent housing director this fall.
We also have an incoming vice chancellor for students who will oversee student housing, so it's probably an appropriate time to make a fresh start.
UH will get a chance to respond to the auditor's findings before they are submitted to lawmakers in January. Cedric Moon, KGMB9 News.
Thank you, Chair He and Senators. Thank you for inviting me to be here this morning. Let me just describe my involvement in this situation. Obviously, there's a lot of issues here, and I've only been privy to a few of them, so I hope you'll understand that this is not by any means a comprehensive analysis. I was contacted in December by Grant Teichman and two of his colleagues from ASUH, who met with me in my office and explained some of the issues that had been raised, focusing in particular with their inability to have letters distributed to persons in the dormitories. They had put together a letter in which they described what they thought were the constitutional rights of dorm residents, and apparently the housing office would not allow that to be distributed through the mail system, nor would the rules allow the letters to be put in front of everybody's door or underneath their door or anything. In other words, there was no way of getting this particular letter to the dorm residents. After hearing that, and apparently the Housing Authority blocked this because the Housing Office thought that the letter was misleading, was not accurate in terms of how it represented what the rights of the students were in relationship to the rights of the Housing Office. After hearing their story and reading some of the press clippings about it to familiarize myself with it, I contacted the interim vice chancellor for students, Wayne Iwaoka, who's here this morning, and just to explain to him that I had been teaching constitutional law here for 30 years, and before that at Hastings Law School in San Francisco and at Catholic University in Washington, D.C., and that I thought that this might have been handled awkwardly, and that it would seem to me that in a public university, the ability of the student government to send letters to their constituents would be self-evident, and that the university ought to be facilitating that rather than blocking it. And with regard to the specific issues about the rights of the students in their dorms, I tried to also explain that that is also an area that's confusing, and it's not clear what their rights are. In other words, the housing office, as I understand it, has the students write some kind of contract where they agree to certain having doors open at certain times and being subject to searches and so on. But I was explaining that we also have, the U.S. Constitution and the Hawaii Constitution, which have rights of privacy, and at a public university, those constitutional rights the students would have access to those constitutional rights, and that the contract couldn't override the constitutional rights. And so that at least we ought to be involved in a dialogue whereby different groups put out their views as to what the rights of the students were, and that it would be improper for the university to insist that its views were the only possible views on this issue, and that we ought to be promoting a public debate about it. In any event, Vice Chancellor Iwaoka responded in a collegial and appropriate way, and said that he agreed that this situation might have been handled awkwardly, and we've communicated in the weeks and months that have followed, and have talked about the issues, and he's been quite open and committed to trying to defuse the situation and find an appropriate resolution. And as I understand it, at least the distribution of letters, that issue has more or less been resolved, and the university now seems to be open to allowing the letters to be distributed. I think with regard to the rights of students in the dorms and the searches and so on, that perhaps is not yet resolved, and more discussion is going to have to take place on that. And of course, you are balancing a number of factors there. The university has an obligation to provide a safe environment for the students, and so there may well be situations where searches of rooms must take place, and we have, of course, procedures for getting warrants and so on, and allowing searches to take place in people's residence. But I don't think it would be right to say that a student has no rights and that the Fourth Amendment doesn't exist in our dorms. I think students are adults, of course, and they have constitutional rights like the rest of us. And the University of Hawaii, as a creation of the Hawaii Constitution, is bound by its limitations and restrictions. So that's my involvement here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.